start recording and let me introduce you.
And introduce yourself too, Serena.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I am Serena Wilson with the Office of Training and Professional Development at Department of Children's Services. I'm glad to be here today with Mary Rolando, who is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Innovations Director here at DCS. And I'm also here with Bonnie Beneke, who is a Director in the Office of Training and Professional Development at DCS as well. We are very glad you're all here today. Right now we have 64 people on the webinar, so this is very exciting. I expect that some people will be continue to join as we go through here. You will notice that you have come in on mute, and we did that for a reason, and that's because there's often a lot of background noise when everyone is off of mute. At a certain point at the end of the presentation, we will take people off mute and allow you to have questions. In the meantime, we would really like it if you could orient yourself to the chat box, and I'm going to send out a chat to everyone here, and it would be great if you could send a hello chat back, just so that I know. If everyone could send a hello chat so that I know that you know where the chat box is. Hello, Erin. Hello, Samantha. Hi, Kendi, Rifana, Deborah. Oh, goodness. Connie, Haley, Jamie, Elizabeth, Tammy, Sarah, Ruth, Teresa, Amy. Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. Amy, Candace, Katie, Kathy. So, yes. So, how we would like to conduct the webinar today. Hello, Donna, Sandra, Patricia, Ginger. We are going to, Mary is going to present the information on the slides, but if you have a question as we go, please type your question into the chat box. At the end of a slide, we will address some of the questions that come in, and again, we'll have time for Q&A at the very end of the webinar. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you, Mary, for presenting this information. I'm going to hand it over to Mary.
Well, thank you very much, Serena, and just let me say at the outset that I really appreciate the technical assistance that you've given Bonnie and me in setting up this webinar. I do think it's a good way to be able to reach this large number of people who have an interest in this year's announcement of funds. I think most people know that we currently have 35 projects that are funded across the state as community innovations, and the intent, and everybody has been on notice about this for a year, is to close out all of those effective June 30, 2019, in order to open up a whole new cohort of projects to be funded under this announcement of funds. So thank you for being here, and thank you for your interest. I think that probably all of you are sufficiently grant savvy to understand that the purpose of this announcement of funds is to get proposals for what we refer to as innovative projects to address, prevent, or mitigate ACEs. We want to initiate a new cohort of projects beginning July 1, some of which will be continued in subsequent fiscal years depending on the funds available and actually whether or not your project might be accomplished in 1 year, and certainly based on performance. And then also, we wanted to describe the types of projects that we'll look to support this year and subsequent years across Tennessee. For those of you who've had familiarity with the prior announcement of funds, I think you'll see some conceptual differences that are based on actually learnings that we've experienced during the period of the initial projects. Oops. So, as you might expect, we have some expectation that people would have familiarity with Building Strong Brains Tennessee and the efforts to change the culture in the state. I'm sure that there are some of you who are in this webinar who've had the opportunity to influence the culture change that we do think is actually happening. We have some expectation that people would have familiarity with the values and metaphors that have been developed by the Frameworks Institute and that we've used widely throughout Tennessee. In the AOF itself, there is a link to the Frameworks Institute website. Certainly avail yourself of that. Everything on that website is free, and we have certainly appreciated the really great relationship that we've had with Frameworks that continues even beyond the initial work that was done. And then I'm certain that most, if not all of you, are familiar with what we refer to as the 4 Ps, in which there is that intent to prevent, mitigate, and help recovery in the multi-sector, multi-level, public and private sectors. And so what impacts. And so what I would point out to those of you who have seen this before is that we actually revised it to add 2 sectors that had not been articulated very clearly before, and that was to add specifically community. And then because we are interested in civic engagement, and some of you have probably been involved in that kind of activity and your activities in your communities. So we wanted to note that in particular. And then higher ed and academia. It was thought that we needed to break that out from just an understanding that education is important, of course, but looking at academia and higher ed. And so
Mary,
then, yes?
Would you like to take a question?
Certainly.
Deborah asked, can we get a list of current grantees and projects?
They are on the department's website, and we can make that, and so we can make that website available to everyone.
Thank you.
Or the web page, yeah. Yeah, that's easy to do. All right, so this is one of the important dates that's not on here. However, I will note that among all the questions that we get, we will post written answers to those, and it will include the questions that are asked today, such as the one just now. We'll post the questions by the end of this week. The proposals are due at March 15 at 4 p.m. I wish I'd put noon, mainly because the state is obligated, we, the state, are obligated to open all of the proposals. So at that time, and we'll begin inventorying them. And then we try to give you as interested parties as much time as possible to be able to develop good proposals. And yet we are trying to have the evaluations completed and the successful applicants notified by the end of March. And that is to permit us to negotiate contracts and get them so that monies would be available to the successful applicants on July 1. And so I think that among the important things that you're probably aware of is that communications need to be in writing, and email is acceptable to Bonnie Beneke, who has been our partner, invaluable partner in this process. I want to specify, too, then in that second bullet, that ratings alone are not the sole criterion for selections. And that relates to item number 3 there, which is that we will try to achieve some amount of equity in the distribution of the resources among East, Middle, and West Grand regions, so long as there are worthy proposals in all regions. And the matter of that is that I think that in the first year in which we had resources, it was a good decision to say that we really wanted this to be a statewide initiative. And on that basis, let's, try and get the funds out there equitably. I think the consensus is that that's held us in good position for really having the community innovations that have been funded to date to be spark plugs for a lot of activity across the state and not just in particular areas.
Mary?
So yes?
Jamie has a question. She asks, are the questions and answers something that is turned in by the applicant?
No. All the questions that are posed to us, and it can be through this webinar, in writing to Bonnie Beneke as an email question, we will answer and then post them at the same location as this AOF is posted. and that will be on the Department of Children's Services procurement page. Does that answer the question? So yes, you submit the questions, but we answer. Yeah, you submit the questions and we answer them. Let's see. All right, so we do ask that you submit 1 original and 4 hard copies, and then 1 digital copy, flash drive or CD that's clearly labeled. And for the sake of our convenience, and particularly my convenience, when it comes time to writing the scopes and dealing with your proposals, if the proposal can be 1 continuous document, that's really preferable to having it as several standalone documents, if that makes sense. And that is to say that in the sequence that is laid out in the announcement of funds, if you start with the face sheet and just run all the way through, that's very helpful, but it's not necessarily prohibitive if it's not done that way. Proposals have to be mailed or delivered by 4 p.m. Central on March 15 to the address in the announcement of funds, and that's to Bonnie. And then we want to caution you that if you do use the U.S. Postal Service, you need to allow extra days for the announcement of funds to be processed as mail through the state's postal system. As you might expect, we have our own zip code. Everything has to go through the state's system, and so if you use the U.S. Postal Service, so allow time for that. And then please do not submit proposals in notebooks, folders, or other types of binders, because we then have very little use for hard binders. It takes time to take them out, and so we greatly appreciate if you would not do that. And so I think the format and content are pretty clear in the announcement of funds, but just a reminder that materials need to be submitted in the order listed on the AOF, which means start with the face page, please. Double-spaced content, font size 12, 1-inch margins. And then we ask that the content be no longer than 12 pages, excluding those items that are listed there. I think that's pretty typical, and I think that gives a good bit of flexibility for how well you articulate your proposal itself. That's, of course, the most important part to us. And in addition to the budget and the budget narrative, we do look very, very carefully at the budget narrative to determine that it does support the budget that is being requested and the project. And then we ask that the pages be numbered and stapled or clipped in some way, but no binders.
Mary?
Yes.
We have 2 questions that are similar.
Okay.
One question is, how much time should we allow for United States Postal Service? And Tammy asked approximately how many additional days would be needed for mailing due to the state's postal system. So I think these are pretty much the same question. Yes. And then another question just came in.
Okay. Well, quite honestly, I would say allow 5 extra days because I think it's better to be safe than sorry. And my gauge for that is that when we went through this process last year, we did have a couple of proposals that came in well after we had begun the evaluation process, and we just simply had to set them aside. So I would say allow at least 5 days. Bonnie, what do you think?
Yes, I would agree with that. I think you need to know that it goes through several different steps, and I think 5 days, you know, even if you send it priority mail, it may reach our state system, but it may not reach the Department of Children's Services for several days.
Yeah, good point.
And so we have a few more questions.
Okay.
Amy asks, can tables and charts within the proposal be single-spaced?
Yes, if it's something that makes it clearer that way, certainly.
Okay. And Sarah asks, Is there a format or page limit for the budget narrative? Is this separate from the budget line item detail page?
Well, I'll have to go back and look at that. Let me look at the AOF real quickly. The budget, yes, the budget narrative can be in addition to the budget detail, because if that will help to give a better understanding of how the resources will support the objectives of the project, then yes, please let your budget narrative be the description that you want. Don't make it too long, but make it descriptive. That's a great question. Bonnie, would you agree with that response?
I agree, yes. I think that's real important. Yes.
Okay.
There's not necessarily enough space on the budget detail, so it would be helpful to add additional information.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, actually. Almeida asked, does the proposal need to be signed for? I'm guessing through like a certified letter.
What we have done, if you send it by FedEx or UPS or something of that sort, we do sign for it. If you deliver it to UBS Tower in Nashville, we give you a receipt for it. And then I think, as Bonnie said, if you send it by priority mail through the postal system, that you automatically get a receipt for that. We try to be really, I would not even say we try, we are really very responsible in handling your materials.
Kendall asks, if we were to hand deliver, are there any special instructions? Will there be a way we can receive a confirmation of receipt if we hand deliver?
Yes, in that I've just said we just make this statement that says, you know, we received, and I'll dig out last year's, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's very simple, but it is a receipt that says that, you know, we got your proposal on this date and either Bonnie or I signed for it. Now, I will say that we'll set up a system with security on the first floor of UBS so that you will not have to try and get to the 10th floor of the tower. We'll work out something so that security will know just to call us and we'll come down and get it.
And the last question I have for now is, should we allow 5 days if we FedEx or UPS? No, because they will deliver right to us and we'll sign for it. So if you do something, you know, overnight from FedEx, they're basically obligated to get it here, but of course it has to be here by 4 o'clock on the 15th of March. Okay, thank you. That's all the questions we have for now.
Okay. Let's see. Again, the announcement has been written in fairly broad terms to permit a variety of responses, because we know that there's no bullet, there's no one approach to addressing or preventing, mitigating ACEs. But we do want there to be an indication that you really do have a depth of knowledge about everything that we've tried to accomplish with the integration of brain science and communication science and changing the culture. This year, we include a much larger focus on addressing community conditions that are or contribute to ACEs than we have done in the past. And this is one of those areas where the reason for that is that we need to capitalize on what we've learned over the period of time that we've had the exposure to the Harvard Center for the Developing Child, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, which is encouraging us to think bigger. That is, how do we address some of the root causes of ACEs, and then what we have learned, again, about how children and families learn in public places. So we encourage you to look at that segment of the announcement of funds with a new lens. And then it does require that, that you indicate which of the administration's priorities that your application might closely relate to, or at least have some alignment. And those priorities are rural economic development, healthcare, mental health, criminal justice, and education. And so we say in the AOS that priority proposals can get as much as up to 20 points, and we will give consideration to strong partnerships and partners' roles. The point of this is that we think that the state is at a juncture where, while we encourage that you have up to 3 letters of support, that we really want to see partnerships that can accomplish collective impact and community goals. We're looking for ACEs mitigation strategies applied to vocational training and workforce development. This is relatively new, and in the AOS, it's at the top of page 11 that we say that we will look at those that address the social determinants of workforce development and economic security. And the concept, as we tried to articulate there, is that with the administration's focus on skill building and the like, we know that young people still are, building stronger brains. And so to the extent that the issues of the social determinants of health are real, there are the social determinants of workforce development. We're looking for strategies for support in rural areas. And as I mentioned before, in terms of public places where people can learn, we are looking at, we will prioritize learning and engagement in public places, and have given you a link in the AOF to some examples of that we think are both innovative and effective. And then one of the challenges that was apparent during the 3 years that we have been able to fund community innovations is that it's hard to engage families. Sometimes it's because of the structure of people working during the day, and yet it being difficult to get to locations in the evening. Professional staff is accustomed to working during the day most of the time. But we really would look at those approaches that can increase family engagement. And then also interventions that can be brought to scale. Among the things that we're being asked is, how can we get this spread across the state? One answer is learning communities so that we learn from each other, but there are also some things where one might, roll out an effort over a period of time.
Mary?
Yes?
Would you like to take a couple of questions?
Certainly.
Okay, Adam asked, would it be possible for you to succinctly define community conditions in a concrete way?
Yes. Some of the community conditions that contribute to ACEs include those of trauma and social location, like under the expanded pyramid that we've used recently. It is, racism, bullying, things of that sort. However, there are also the issues of, and let me get something very quickly. In fact, if I pull up you'll be able to see my screen, right?
You would need to share your screen.
Okay, hold on. Okay, and how do I share my screen?
At the very top, the third tab from the right says Share.
Oh, yeah, it says Share. Okay.
And you should have a Share My Desktop. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
Do that down at the bottom, Mary. Yeah.
Okay, now can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that is promoted by DEEPS and BCR framework and is being used widely across the country now. And so here you have the typical ACEs that we are all very, very familiar with. And below we have the roots of some adverse community environments that contribute to or are ACEs. So you see poverty, discrimination, community disruption, lack of opportunity and economic mobility and social capital, poor housing, quality and affordability, and violence. And then some of the new thinking is that if one collaborates, there are a variety of solutions to these conditions that can contribute to ACEs. And I think that if you think about the priorities that have been established in this announcement of funds, then you know, we try to get at things like child welfare system and you know, public health system, that kind of thing. And it's a big undertaking, but you know, if one were to provide some proposal that would address any of these things like public housing or helping young people to get jobs or employment services, continuing education, you know, affordable housing. And I know that these are big things, that those would be really innovations that could take us into another generation of thinking about this. So now I'm going to close that out.
And you're going to want to go to the top and where it says stop sharing, click stop sharing.
Share application. Wait a minute. Oh, I hope I have.
You should see an orange button that says stop sharing. There you go.
Okay. Did that go off on too much of a tangent, you guys?
No.
Okay.
And Deborah wants to know if these slides from this presentation will be available to the participants after the call.
Yes.
Okay.
Because we're going to post, Serena, we're going to post both the frames and this as an archived event, right?
Right, and Nancy said, no, that was great. She found it very informative. And Almeida said that she would like to have that information that you just shared. Cindy would also like that, as well as Nicole.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is, you know, lessons learned during the period of time that we've been doing this. And, you know, we really, really want to keep Tennessee on the cutting edge. It's fun that way. So in terms of experience, we are looking for a track record that can include credentials, successful partnerships, or other evidence of your ability to perform and support proposed activities. Basically, it is that when we began this effort, it was advised that we not fund startups. And there's a real merit to that notion, because we didn't want to fund something as a startup and then, you know, have 6 months into it, have the project go away and have forfeited those resources. And so it isn't that the experience has to be specifically in this innovation that one might be proposing, but definitely some evidence that the applicant has the ability to perform the project. And then match resources are not required. However, we do give consideration about that when we're evaluating the budget. Oops. Okay, and then wrapping it up with this, the budget needs to be, you know, sufficient to achieve the objectives of the project, yet they need to be economical as possible, because, you know, it's such a privilege to have the resources made available to the state for us to fund innovation. We want to do as much as possible with these resources and to be good stewards. And then the budget narrative, as we talked about before, needs to be sufficiently descriptive that it supports the amounts that are requested and their importance to the proposal. And then again, I want to be really clear that the request for 4 budgets, one for each of the potential years of funding, is to support renewal grants, but that is contingent upon funds and performance. And as is stated in the announcement of funds, we're also interested in, budgets and projects that are basically, small budget, big impact, things that can be accomplished in 1 fiscal year or so, because it has permitted a lot of tools and skill building across the state. So we welcome the small projects as well as ones that might be multi-year. So that's basically it. Are there additional questions?
Mary, Kathy asks, are there examples of previous grant budgets and or descriptions?
All of the, let's see, Bonnie, help me answer this. The answer is basically yes. I mean, everything that we do has to be made public. So every one of the grantees is posted. I'm just not sure how one gets them. Let me say I'll find out how a citizen.
Mary, excuse me, Mary, but I think that once that time limit is up, I think that there is a period of time after the grants are awarded, but I'm not sure beyond that that they're accessible.
Well, and so that's where I say let's find out.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the state business has to be public, basically.
Right.
And so, we know where to go and find a contract, but I don't know how a citizen does that. But then again, on the DCS website, we do have a description of each of the projects. It's a summary and the amounts that have been awarded in the past. So let's make sure we've got that question, and we will answer that by the time that we're obligated to post the responses to all these questions.
Alice asks, where can we find the logic model needed for the grant? The link does not take me to a logic model.
Well, I'll have to proof check that because, a logic model has to be descriptive of an individual project, basically. And so what might be a logic model that would apply to let's say, a mentoring program would be very different than the logic model that might apply to a school. So there is no, I think the link I gave you is one that lays out what one would anticipate, what are the steps that one would go through to say, here are the resources that would be needed, here's how we would use them, here's what the results would be in the projected outcomes.
And so Erin asks, will there be preference given to projects that provide direct services versus indirect as in years past?
I don't know what indirect services means.
So Bonnie,
okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I am recalling that I think it was in the second year of funding, we did say that we would give priority consideration to true innovation with children and families and caregivers, which obviously would be direct intervention. And yet at the same time, the operative term there is innovation. And part of it is that, for example, people will say if you were going to bring only one effort to scale, if you were going to bring one intervention to scale, what would it be? And almost uniformly, people will say, home visitation programs. Well, we are strong supporters of home visitation programs. However, they are of sufficient significance that they need to have standalone appropriations, and they do. So the innovations that have occurred otherwise are described in the several years of funding that we've had. And at this moment, I can't recall one that I wouldn't feel comfortable calling out one in particular. But this year, what we've said is there are primarily the two areas of focus that we are very interested in, and the one is stated on the bottom of page 9 is, if proposing child development interventions and or direct services to children, youth, young adults, and their caretakers, please identify certain things. And then if one is proposing to address community conditions that are or may contribute to ACEs, address yourselves to the several items that are there. I hope that answered the question, but it may not.
So Erin we had a lot of stuff come in. Erin says programs that are not providing direct services to those actually working with children and families, but indirect to evaluate efficacy to bring projects to a larger scale. So I think she was kind of clarifying her intention there.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say that we would exclude projects that have, that are evaluative in nature, but we certainly are gearing, I think, the foci of the AOF to promoting activity of some sort, whether it is with families and children, with students, in communities, and the like. I mean, we have an obligation to do evaluation of what we're doing, but that's a state responsibility. Okay. But I may have miscued. I hope not.
And both Connie and Cindy have said that the link to the logic model does not work. So, and they had asked for that. So we will make note of that as questions to follow up on. Sure. Amy asks, will preference be given to projects completed in 1 year versus those projects that provide ongoing services?
There's no definitive answer to that. We certainly, we look favorably on some projects that can be accomplished in 1 year because it permits us to continue to have resources in subsequent years to do additional activities. So, for example, if a project is proposed that we think has real value, that addresses the 4 Ps, it has impact, is well constructed and evaluated as being very doable, and it can be accomplished in 1 year, then we say this is great. We've got $50,000 to put into this project, and then when that ends, then we've got $50,000 to put into a new project in FY21. So there's no hard and fast rule, but I think we just want to be clear that we certainly do take into consideration establishment grants or things that can take place and be accomplished in a year among all other considerations that go into this. East, Middle, and West, quality of the proposal overall, all the elements that are specified in the announcement. Bonnie, was that clear?
Yes, I think that's clear. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So Adam asks, so the grant proposal is for 1 year of funding, but we should also include a multi-year budget for potential renewal of funding.
Correct. And so if you get up and running in the first year and things are going well and the project will address the additional activity that can be accomplished with, having established something, then yes, we will very seriously consider subsequent funding in subsequent years.
Okay. Katie asks, if we already have a home visitation program in place with funded positions, could we request funds for an ACES specialist who can help improve and design our resources, conduct trainings for current staff, and ensure staff are using appropriate interventions with families? This may relate to the question regarding direct versus indirect services.
You are at liberty to propose any activity that you think addresses the criteria in the announcement of funds, and it is the responsibility then of the team that evaluates the proposals to decide whether or not that proposal is worthy. That sounds odd, but I mean, we can't say to any individual at this time that the proposal as being described would be funded. I don't want to dodge the question, but we have tried to write the announcement broad enough to be able to entertain a variety of proposals. And so if this individual, Amy, I think, believes that that is something that would enhance the service and, you know, address, prevent, mitigate ACEs, then we'll be happy to receive that proposal.
Okay. Aaron asks, would the state look favorably on multi-year budgets that demonstrate an intent to seek external federal dollars to continue the project beyond the state support?
Oh, certainly. I mean, diversifying revenue streams can be very, very helpful for sustainability. And in fact, we asked for a sustainability plan.
Okay, so that's all of the questions in the chat box right now.
Well, these have been great questions, and I hope that the responses have been adequate, and where they have not been adequate, we'll get a better response for you.
And feel free to submit additional questions in writing. You can email those to me, and then we will post the response to all questions where the AOF is posted on our website. This has been great.
And we are obligated to answer these questions by close of business on the 22nd.
Wonderful. So Nancy says, wait. Let me see here. Perhaps Nancy has a question. But Constance says, thank you. This has been informative. Thank you, Constance. Marilyn, thank you. Great information. Thank you, Ms. Rolando. They have been awesomely responsive. Nancy, let's see, Nancy has her question. She says, just looking at your webpage, where should I be looking to see previous funded grants? And we kind of had that question earlier.
Go down to, if you're on the department's webpage, go to the far right column. Down at the bottom, it will say adverse childhood experiences, or I think that's ACES initiative or something. And if you click on that, it will get you to the projects that it will have a big Building Strong Brains logo. It will get you to a description, a summary description of all the projects that have been funded for FY 16, 17, and 18, no, 18, 19, whatever, all 3 fiscal years. And there's some other information on there that could be very valuable to you that comes under the heading of the summit. because we posted the presentations from the summit and also the videos. So right-hand column under community, last item under community.
Okay, and Almeida asked, did we clarify when the logic model will be available?
I'm going to Google logic model just as soon as we get off of here, and we'll post it in the response to all the questions.
And Donna Mitchell told us that you can get to the logic model by going through Basecamp. And she sent a link for that, so we can include that in our follow-up email.
Okay, great. Yeah. I love it when people do things.
I know, it's wonderful. Oh, Ruth says she sees it. Luke says the logic model is supposed to be from the program proposed by the applicants. Right. Nancy found it. Thanks. She said so. Thank you, Nancy. Let's see. Johnny, you're asking about the DCS website address. Here, I can find that real quick and send it to you.
Well, I know if you go to Tennessee State Government, and then the drop box is under directory.
So there is the DCS website. And if we have any other questions, please type in to the chat box. It looks like people are heading out.
Well, we really appreciate everyone's interest. This is really terrific.
It is. Almeida said thank you. This is so helpful. Luke says thank you. Ruth says thank you.
Great.
All right.
Thanks, Patricia. Thanks everyone so much. Have a great day. We'll get the other information out soon. Thank you, Johnny. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Donna.
Well, thank you, Serena. Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Mary. Good job.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. Yeah.
All right.
Close it up.
We'll sign off.
Okay.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.